So this past April, I got to go to Bahamas for the first time, and I loved it. The weather was amazing. We did shopping, we did sightseeing, and the people were just awesome. I really love the Bahamas. But then there was this one guy. I want to talk about this one guy. So we're doing this tour, this boat tour. It's really cool. And so we're on the boat, nice weather, really chill. And he's doing all these really bad, what I would call dad jokes. I'm a dad, but these are some bad jokes. And so I'm sitting here and I'm, just kind of ignoring them, whatever. And then all of a sudden, I hear, and guess who's coming to dinner? This dude's looking straight at me. And I'm like, bruh. So a little side note. So I'm there with my white wife. And so all the places we've been, no comments, at least not to our face. And so I'm on this ship and we're the only interracial couple up there. And this dude looking at me talking about, guess who coming to dinner? I'm like, we know who's not invited to dinner. You. Come on, man. But again, definitely want to go back and, looking forward to going to Bahamas. Hopefully that dude ain't there. Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Jason Freeman. I'd like to welcome you all to my channel. In this video, I answer the question, are the Bahamas really an independent country? Now, at any point, feel free to click the notification bell or subscribe to my channel to get more content. So, without further ado, let's begin. Now, the Bahamas are a group of about 3,000 islands as part of what's called the Lucayan Archipelago. Now, the Lucayan Archipelago includes the Bahamas Archipelago, or the Bahamas Islands, as well as the British territorial islands, Turks and Caicos. Now, the original inhabitants of the Bahamas were a group of native peoples called the Lucayans. Now, they were largely wiped out from the Bahamas Islands in the early 16th century. However, recent evidence seems to show that the DNA of the Lucayans are still present in populations such as Puerto Ricans within the Caribbean. The Bahamas were a British colony from the 17th century all the way till 1973, when the British House of Lords voted to grant the Bahamas full independence. And just a little historical side note. So after the American Revolution, many of the British loyalists, so people who were in the American colonies who were still loyal to the crown, were actually resettled in the Bahamas. And along with these loyalists, who were essentially, again, part of the American colonies, but again, loyal to the crown, they brought along with them many of their slaves. So from that point on, the Bahamas has been majority black, because essentially you had these kind of loyalist resettlers, you had the people who were there, along with a large number of essentially African-American slaves, and they were also importing slaves up until the early 1800s when they outlawed the slave trade. Now, why do I question whether or not the Bahamas are an independent country? Well, while I was there in April, a couple things kind of came to light, or things I learned a couple things that really started to make me question whether or not the Bahamas still could be considered an independent country. So the first thing is the head of state of the Bahamas is not the prime minister. It's actually the monarch. It's actually, at the time, was Queen Elizabeth II, and now it's King Charles III. So again, even though, they have a prime minister, the person who is the head of state is the British monarch. Second, a major official within the government is the governor general. Now, the governor general appoints ministers to the Senate, judges as well as ambassadors, and also he or she appoints the prime minister. Now, the thing about this, the reason why I think it kind of calls into question the independence of Bahamas is that the governor general is appointed by the British monarch. In fact, the governor general is the regal or the royal representative of the monarch in the Bahamas. And lastly, and this is the major one, whenever the Parliament of the Bahamas enacts legislation, that legislation has to receive a royal assent. Now, what is a royal assent? Basically, it's permission or kind of essentially approval from the crown, from the British monarch for that particular legislation. And so in theory, if it's not given, then that particular law doesn't go into effect. And so with all those facts in place, can we really call the Bahamas an independent nation? Well, upon further investigation, I will say the answer is yes. The Bahamas are an independent nation. I'll explain why, even with those things I just mentioned. So the first thing, it comes down to the prime minister. So the prime minister is the actual head of government, even though they're not the head of state. Now, even though the prime minister is actually appointed by the governor general, the prime minister has always been the person who has the majority support within the parliament. And that's actually even in the Constitution. And so even though the governor general does appoint the prime minister, that person is there because they have the majority of support within the parliament. Now, in the case of a hung parliament where it's 50-50, the governor general is then given the kind of the task to put the prime minister in place who's likely to have majority support. So even with that, it's really dictated by who has power within the parliament, and the parliament, of course, is elected by the people. The other thing is that with the governor general, even though they're essentially appointed by the monarch, in the case, in the past, Queen Elizabeth II, and now King Charles III, the appointment is on the recommendation of the prime minister. So in many ways, and practically, the prime minister is the one who ultimately chooses the governor general, who in turn appoints the prime minister in the next term, based on the majority power within the parliament. And lastly, with the issue of royal assent. So the last time royal assent was actually utilized by a British monarch was in 1708, when Queen Anne essentially refused to assent to a law authorizing the Scottish militia. Now, that particular assent was done under the recommendation of her minister. So that wasn't just like a unilateral decision by her. It was based on a political decision by the people who were running the government of Great Britain. And so while in theory, the British monarch has the potential to have significant influence within the Bahamian government, the practical matter is, on a day-to-day basis, Bahama is run by Bahamians, and that's how it's been since independence. And so the answer to the question is yes, the Bahamas are an independent country, even though their structure is different than, say, the U.S., which doesn't really have a monarch as a head of state at all. Now, if you found this video interesting and or informative, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, please share this with anyone you think also might find this interesting. Also, if you have any questions about Bahamas or any other aspect of the African diaspora in the New World, feel free to leave those questions in the comment section below. Thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.